property rights. Muhammad Yunus has worked on microfinance. Conditional cash transfers are projects that were pioneered in Latin America. They're basically a keep kids in school project. If kids aren't going to school, the argument was that they're not going to school because they need to be working at home or in the factories so the family can survive. So they worked out that that was pretty much like $10 a month's worth of income. So they just, in effect, for the purposes of the present, would pay parents that $10, and that was a very nice substitute of the capital for labour, essentially. And in that way, they were able to show that enrolment rates at school were able to skyrocket. And there were a whole bunch of nice randomised trials that have been done on that stuff. Rural roads, connecting poor people to markets, girls' education, Gary Becker's famous maternal altruism effects, the fact that if you invest in women, you tend to get much higher returns developmentally than if you invest the same amount of money in men. You tend to drink or gamble or do other non-investment related activities with it. Green Revolution in India and basic information technology. Probably the coolest study that's been done on information technology is work done by an economist, Rob Jensen, at Brown University now, participating at Harvard, looking at the impact of the introduction of cell phones on fish prices amongst Carol fishermen. Wonderful graph, should be on the cover of any development economics textbook, which shows the price of rice pre the introduction of cell phones. Right? On any given day, the price of rice is wildly fluctuating, right? Because the guys are coming into their boats out of the sea, they have to take whatever the spot price is, it's given to them by the wholesaler who greets them, and the wholesaler in turn has to then truck the fish off to market, and because there's no way of connecting the supply and demand through a price signal in any clean way, the price is just wildly fluctuating all over the place any given day. Introduce cell phones, flat line, right? The guys are coming in from the boats up the night's fish, and they're dialing them away and trying to get the prices in the capital cities, and the port cities, and what the wholesaler is charging, and the noise and the inefficiencies are all cleared out of the system, and the markets really do clear at exactly the same price pretty much every day, and everyone's happy, right? So economists love this, everyone loves it, think this is great, just give cell phones to fishermen and you can make them way better off than they were before. Now you can imagine giving a talk like this at Google, people are sort of falling over you when you tell a story like that because they think, wow, what we can do is give all these cell phones and put this little iPod applications on the inside of their cell phones and we can help them to reduce poverty. Isn't that great? Let's do more of that kind of stuff. Right? So all of these kinds of interventions, right, are sort of what I call development's greatest hits. Right? They work, we've proved it because we've subjected them to randomized controlled studies. And if we really care about these Millennium Development Goals, shouldn't we just take all of these things, put them on steroids, make them bigger and better, and chuck them around the world, and watch beautiful things happen in poor countries? Right? Now, in some sense, maybe, right? There's a lot of good that can be done by doing these kinds of things. They're responding to real problems in the lives of poor people, and aren't you, Michael, just being kind of a spoilsport by suggesting that perhaps maybe there's some other things to worry about in all of this? Right? Well, let's sort of think about this, because I'm going to come back and sort of, as we go forward, as you'll see, provide a bit of a critique of some of these things. Okay, next. All right. What have we got? Next up. Hello. There we go. All right. So we have all these nice rigorous evaluations. In most of these cases, we also have charismatic champions like Muhammad Yunus and Mike and Anna DeSoto, who are sort of very powerful and persuasive in terms of being able to tell all these kinds of stories. And because, as I said, they've been evaluated really well. But these successes are small lines in the success of failure, right? Or at least in the sea of variance. There's enormous variability, actually, with respect to interventions in general, and even these particular interventions themselves don't always work everywhere in one particular place. And I think a good theory of development must be able to explain variation, not just to load up all your resources on the successes that you have. And even so, the problems are urgent, the time is short, resources are finite, everyone's skeptical, even hostile to the whole idea of development. Just doing these things themselves is hard enough, so why complicate the story even more? And more particularly, aren't we just sort of reinventing the wheel if we don't go with these things that have worked? After all, they've been around for a long time. Smart and committed people have been working on this for decades. why should we worry about that? Well, I think we should worry about these. Let's skip down through that and come back to the next one. All right, I think the focus should be on finding solutions to prevailing problems, not just being hucksters or salespeople for these top 10 interventions or variations thereof, wherever we happen to be working. The big danger is that we'll have hammers and we'll just see nails. Right? We'll walk around with our 10 tools, and what do you know? There's a rural roads problem over there. What do you know? There's a microfinance problem over there. And we'll end up just being salespeople for interventions that we already have, rather than being problem solvers for existing problems. Now, the nuance comes in recognizing that in many different cases, microfinance may well indeed be the binding constraint for poverty reduction, as articulated by the poor country or poor people themselves. I want to suggest, though, that we have very weak theories and strategies for soliciting what we think are the priority problems in countries, and we have even weaker theories and strategies for responding to problems of a particular kind. And I'll articulate and sort of try and create some categories for it shortly. But these are particular problems that don't map neatly onto a particular technology. And the kinds of problems that I worry about, which are largely questions of legal and institutional reform, questions of enhancing access to justice systems for poor people, there is no, inherently cannot be, a technology or a single solution for these kinds of problems. And when you think there might be, or there could be, or that these kind of problems can be reducible to one zeros in the way that Google-type technology or computer applications more generally, by definition, can be, then I think we're starting to get into very messy areas, and where development starts to, development practitioners and development practice starts to seriously undermine its own capacity to be useful in this business. Right? So you're a huge star, you're a rock star, frankly, in this business, if you are someone like Renata Bessoto, or you're someone who can come up with the solution for a particular problem. The system will reward you enormously. It will promote you quickly, it will shower you with resources, it will hail you as a hero for solving the problems of poor people. Right? But there's a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of these problems in the world that just aren't solvable that particular way, or more particularly, have time horizons that are well into the future in terms of how they will end up being resolved. The kinds of institutional transitions that are likely to occur, moreover, are likely to get worse in some sense before they get better. The outcomes that we're concerned with when you're talking about issues of women's empowerment, for example, or enhancing the voting rights of minority groups, the first thing that's likely to happen when you challenge the prevailing orthodoxy or the elite authority that likes things the way they are in those countries is there will be a big backlash against all of that. And if you live in a world where you're being rewarded as a project manager for meeting targets in the short run, for showing that you can do Millennium Development Goal type thinking, right? Anything that has these long-term time trajectories, any problem that doesn't comport to that short-term time is going to be consigned to a second-order importance. Right? And I think those issues are really fundamental. The way in which we respond to legal reform and governance reform in particular countries fundamentally does actually require us to reinvent the wheel each time. These are not technologies or blueprints that we can just transplant around the world. We the development community, have a very long and unhappy history of believing that something like institutional practice works well here, it'll work well there. Right? And that's most graphic and vulgar form that produced the Gulf War, a belief that democracy can be exported and just transported into one country at the point of a gun. Right? But softer versions of exactly that same kind of problem, or that kind of thinking, have pervaded development since the whole industry really began in the post-World War period. And in the questions that we're addressing here on legal and institutional reform in particular, are especially prone to that kind of problem. A belief that if you need a stock exchange, if you need a constitution, if you need a set of commercial codes to enhance and facilitate market exchange, well, we know it works in Singapore, so let's take it over there. Right? Let's take it to Ukraine in the aftermath of a political revolution in a country like that. These examples are right. They were explicit during the period of colonialism. The structures of education in Singapore are more or less identical to the structures of the UK, which are modelled again in countries like Nigeria. Right? So we had a period when it was overtly done. The pressures to do it remain. The pressures to short-circuit and fast-track things like institutional reform are really, really powerfully present still today. And I suggest the historical lesson for